Hello, dear viewers. I am a global nationalist. I support nationalism in my country, India, and in all countries around the globe. Today is the last Sunday of the month, and so, as per my schedule, I will be making a video about this whole month, the videos I made this month, summarizing them and giving updates on what I reported in them. Uh, First off, I want to talk about. Excuse me. Just wait a minute. Yes, the first video I made was about the COP26 summit, in which countries all over the world under the UN came together to create an agreement to combat climate change. This agreement is called the Glasgow Climate Pact, and here I want in that video I talked about what India's uh, commitments were in that session. And here, after the session has finished, I want to talk about what the agreement says. Now, here's a snapshot of the agreement on the United Nations official website. The outcome document calls on 197 countries to report their progress towards more climate ambition next year at COP27, set to take place in Egypt. The outcome also firms up the global agreement to accelerate action on climate this decade. However, COP26 President, yeah, so uh, here are the main points of the agreement. One, that leaders from over 120 countries, representing about 90% of the world's forests, pledged to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030, the date by which the Sustainable Development Goals, which were created in 2015 to curb poverty and secure a planet's future, were supposed to have been achieved. So, this is one goal I totally agree with. I think that deforestation is a big danger. It reduces the ability of the earth to reabsorb carbon dioxide once emitted. And so, if we can, even if we can't reverse deforestation, we can just reduce it and maybe also start some afforestation. That would be great. And so, I totally agree with this point. There's also a methane pledge led by the United States and the European Union, by which more than 100 countries agreed to cut emissions of this greenhouse gas by 2030. This is something I agree with too, because we have to remember that carbon dioxide is not the only greenhouse gas, but methane is as well. And so, if methane can emissions can be cut, then especially by 100 countries, and I think this can really prevent a lot of temperature rise throughout the world. Meanwhile, more than 40 countries agreed to shift away from coal, uh, include one of the biggest generators of carbon dioxide emissions. These countries include major coal users such as Poland, Vietnam, and Chile. And the private sector also showed strong engagement with nearly 500 global financial services firms agreeing to align $130 trillion, 40% of the world's financial assets, with the goals set out in the Paris Agreement, including limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, because I am not well versed in finances, I don't want to talk much about this. So, yeah, I'll just ignore it. Uh, Also, in a surprise for many, the United States and China, yeah, this is something that happened during the session, the COP26. There was initially a lot of disagreement between the US and China. China was not willing to make any pledge to reduce carbon emissions, and the United States was and wanted China to do the same. Just another one of the areas that they disagree on. So it was a pleasant surprise that they signed an agreement to boost climate cooperation over the next decade. This joint declaration said they had agreed to take steps on a range of issues, including methane emissions, transition to clean energy, and decarbonization. They reiterated their commitment to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal alive. So, yeah, I'm glad that this agreement was formed. This reminds me of the first uh, COP, not the first, but rather COP 21 in 2015 when Barack Obama got an agreement with China whereby the US agreed to cut emissions by 25% in 2027 by 2005 standards. And China agreed to peak its greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Now, this joint declaration went beyond that previous agreement, which and spoke about reducing methane emissions and transitioning to clean energy and decarbonization. So, we have to wait and watch to see how this agreement is carried out in practice between the two countries. But at least there is an agreement, so there is that encouragement. Now, regarding green transport, more than 100 national governments, cities, states, and major car companies signed the Glasgow Declaration on Zero Emission Cars and Vans to end the sale of internal combustion engines by 2035 in leading markets and by 2040 worldwide. This is something that I I can understand the need to push for electric vehicles, and so that because fossil fuel powered cars and vans contribute a lot of carbon dioxide emissions, but I think 2035 and even 2040 is simply too early. That I think it should be 2045 for leading markets and 2050 for worldwide. I think that would be better. And at least 13 nations have committed to end the sale of fossil fuel powered heavy duty vehicles by 2040. So yeah, I these are the commitments made by in the agreement, and I think they're pretty good commitments. I think that they will be able to keep the global temperature, if not to 1.5 degrees Celsius, at least below an increase of 2 degrees Celsius. And I think that humanity can adapt to a temperature rise of more than 1.5, but more than 2 degrees, and that will be very difficult. So even if we're in that in between portion, I'm okay with it. And this is me saying as a 26-year-old person who will grow up in this century and have to live with the consequences of these actions. So yeah, I'm not saying this uh, flippantly. I think that's the word, flippant. Yeah. Now, as far as India goes, I think that these are good points, along with the commitments made by India itself, such as to um, to cause all its railways to use greenhouse gases. Sorry, I mean to use renewable energies for its electricity, to reduce the amount of the percentage that fossil fuels account for India's total energy matrix, and other goals. I agree with them. Now, there was a little controversy towards the end of this meeting because, yeah, because in the agreement, there was a last minute change to the pact by China and India, which often language circulated in an earlier draft about the phase out of unabated coal power and of inefficient subsidies for fossil fuels. As adopted on Saturday, that language is revised to phase down coal use. This is something I agree with. I don't think we can phase out of coal use. I think as long as coal is there, we'll have to use it. We can just reduce how much we use of it because we can't completely replace it. It's such a good fuel that runs the whole world and especially India's national economy that we can't just get rid of it. At least not within the next near future. But I do think that advanced countries like the US and Western Europe can phase it out by 2050 or 2060. So yeah, I don't have a problem with India uh, softening this language and revising it to phase down. It must be mentioned though that India clarified that it did not actually ask for um, the phase out to be revised to phase down, and says that it was only concerned with making sure that fossil fuel subsidies were not targeted because India needed them for the poor. So yeah, I um, unlike Mr. Alok Sharma, the president of COP26, who was very upset when with the final agreement, I think that this was a good agreement, and I'm happy with how COP26 went by, and I'm confident that we can work together as a global community to combat climate change. And yeah, so the other um, topic, the video after that I made was about just 1 minute, was about Hindutva and secularism, which are the two major political philosophies in India. And I talked about how they impact India's nationalism, how Indian nationalism is viewed through both their lenses. Since then, there has been a debate going on in India, revived rather, about Hindutva and Hinduism. This comes because of Salman Khurshid, India's former external affairs minister, who in his recent book Sunrise over Ayodhya, Nationhood in Our Times, he said that Sanatana Dharma and classical Hinduism has been pushed aside by a robust version of Hindutva, which, by all standards, a political version similar to the jihadist Islam of groups like ISIS and Boko Haram of recent years. This caused a major controversy. Like, he should not have written this because Hindutva is not something separate from Hinduism. It's not a different concept, it's part of Hinduism. It means literally Hinduness. And so you're basically saying that Hindutva can become, is as fundamentalist and as extremist as the ideologies followed by these terrorist groups, which is false because Hindutva, first of all, is nationalistic ideology. It is aimed at only the Indian subcontinent, and it doesn't talk about conquering other countries and forcing Hinduism on them, which is what the jihadist ideology followed by Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS and Boko Haram follow. Also, Hindutva doesn't take away the rights of non Hindus to practice their religion because Hindutva, being from Hinduism, uh, believes in the equality of all religions and simply asks that other religions also accept that belief. Yeah, so I think that this was a very wrong statement for him to write, and the fact that Rahul Gandhi went on to uh, beat this horse, so to speak, is a political blunder. He can easily be called anti-Hindu, which wouldn't be false because his party has regularly taken positions that were anti-Hindu in nature and pro-Muslim and pro-Christian. So yeah, I think that uh, this is completely wrong, and this the debate about Hinduism and Hindutva is not very valid. Now, um, this in later on the 28th of November, Mohan Bhagwat, the chief of the RSS, or rather the Sangchalak, um, during an event in Madhya Pradesh's Gwalior, also said that spoke about Hindutva, which is the RSS's founding ideology. He said that the number and strength of Hindus have decreased and the emotion of Hindutva has decreased. If Hindus want to stay as Hindu, then Bharat needs to become Akhand. This is with reference to the Akhand Bharat concept, which I will talk about in a later video. So, yeah, that's very connected to Hindutva. That's why I've mentioned it here. But I do want to say I respectfully disagree with Sarsang Chalak because I don't think that the emotion of Hindutva has decreased. I think it's increased and is stronger now than ever, actually. It's not only something that is on the national mainstream, but has also become a globally renowned ideology. If not approved, at least it's known, which is shows a growth in its popularity. Now, so I don't agree with this, and yeah, the other video I made was about NATO. In that video, I talked about how NATO had removed certain Russian diplomats from its embassy in Brussels, and Russia had removed uh, the office of NATO from Moscow. And yeah, I didn't agree with NATO's decision because those diplomats who they accused of being spies were simply suspected of being spies. They were not proven. NATO countries should have tried them and proven in court of law that they indeed were spies. Then I think Russia would not have responded as it did. I think they would be more apologetic and would try to reconcile with NATO. And now the result of both of these actions by both of them is that there is much less communication between NATO and Russia. And now all that they can use to understand each other is their public statements. Now, the latest statement by the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on Friday warned Russia that any attempt to invade Ukraine would have costs. And because he said this, because There are concerns mounting about a Russian military buildup near its former Soviet neighbors' borders. Ukraine says Moscow's kept about 90,000 to 1 lakh troops, and Moscow, however, has said it's not planning an invasion and refuses to provide the details about troop moves on its own territory. I really don't see why this is a problem. Most countries don't provide details about their troop movements. I think that is confidential information. It's a bit odd that CBS News expects Russia to provide us details. Um, but yeah, like I said in that video, I think that NATO should simply uh, accept Ukraine as a NATO member because that will make Russia understand that NATO will indeed protect Ukraine. However, um, there should be some way for both NATO and Russia to uh, bring come to a compromise over Ukraine, where uh, the Crimea can stay with Russia, and there can be a referendum in the eastern parts of Ukraine about whether they want to join Russia or not, or stay in Ukraine. And I think this referendum should be monitored by the United Nations and not by Russia, which was done in the Crimean referendum, and this is why the UN rejected it. Yeah, I don't see any other solution other than that. And I talked about this also in my video about Russia that I made yesterday. And the Ukraine Prime Minister also called for NATO's help against Russia. So basically, yeah, things are heating up, getting worse between both of them. It's very unfortunate. And the other video I made was about the SCO meeting in October 31st, where they spoke about a protocol to tackle human trafficking across their countries. Now, I want to talk about what some of the countries, their latest statements and actions against human trafficking since that protocol was made. The Minister of State for Home Affairs, Ajay Kumar Mishra, at the United Nations said that India accords high priority to combating human trafficking. He says that India recognized that it's a serious crime and accords high priority to combating it. And he spoke about the anti trafficking legislative framework, how it's based on Article 23, which is forbids exploitation. And he talks about how India has amended its criminal law in 2013. And yeah, so India's continuing to show the world how it's acting against human trafficking, and I'm glad about that. And unfortunately, there's some bad news related to human trafficking coming from China. Yeah, Chinese construction site in Serbia has been accused of using slave labor. These laborers are from Vietnam, and recent media attention has come to this site, and these Vietnamese laborers have spoken about their conditions that they are not given adequate working conditions and a proper working environment, and that they were misled into coming to this site by Chinese authorities. The Serbian government has denied this. And yeah, and the EU reached out to Central Asian countries, including Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan, where EU's chief diplomat asked them to prevent migrants from being human trafficked to Belarus, in the Belarus-Poland border where that migrant crisis is happening. And the diplomat said that the reach out has been very fruitful, and Uzbekistan has imposed restrictions on flights to Belarus for transit passengers from a half dozen countries, including from Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Syria, and Yemen. This shows that all that the CO countries are putting into force the protocol against human trafficking and are taking it very seriously and have not forgotten the issue, which is good, which is a great feeling that I have. Hopefully, this can continue and human trafficking can come to an end in Asia. Other than that, there was also a video I made about Bhutan and China's border dispute, where a memorandum of understanding was signed between both of them, a three-part MOU, which as I said in that video, I could not find the actual text of that MOU and could not talk more about it. However, since then, there was new satellite images were discovered which showed that there had been Chinese military development of purported construction of Chinese villages in Bhutanese territory over the last year. This was from May 2020 till uh, 2021 November. This was shown in a tweet by Damien Simon, a global researcher with the Intel Lab. He says that multiple new villages spread to an area of roughly 100 square kilometers now dot the landscape. He asks if this is part of a new agreement or enforcement of China's territorial claims. So, first of all, this shows how aggressively China has been encroaching upon Bhutan's territory. But the question about whether this is a part of a new agreement is unknown, because I can't say, because this is about whether the MOU signed uh, by Bhutan acquiesces to these constructions and allows China to take these territories, but or else it doesn't. So I can't say about that because yeah. So I wish Bhutanese people luck and hope that they can defend their territory against China. And yeah, that's all I can say. Then I made a video about Japan's Fumio Kishida, the prime minister's election, that he won in October, and I talked about how he intends to remilitarize Japan's constitution, remove Article 9, and I talked about how this will affect Japan's relationships with the other Quad members. I love talking about Quad, it's just four different countries. You can focus on each, it's much easier than the SCO and NATO. Although, of course, those also have their own interests. I'm just talking about Quad right now. Japan's cabinet on Friday approved us. Yeah. So as you can see, that Japan has approved a $6.8 billion request for an extra defense budget until March next year. This is a new high from 53.2 billion spent in 2020. And also, Japan has said that they will upgrade surface to air missile launchers on islands at the edge of the East China Sea and the Patriot Pact 3 missile batteries elsewhere that are the last line of defense against any incoming North Korean warheads. So, Japan is becoming more aggressive, as I predicted uh, in that video, and they're taking more actions to make themselves capable of defending against China and also, in this case, North Korea, which is something I approve. I'm very happy that Japan is taking a more assertive stance on its own national security and isn't just depending on the US. And like I said in that video, that this will strengthen the Quad as a whole. And the last video I made was about um, Russia and Ukraine, where I talked about how Russia's options to resolve the conflict. They can either choose uh, one to keep Crimea and to allow a referendum in the Donbass and other regions of Ukraine, which are Russian dominated, by the UN to decide whether the people want to join Russia or be with Ukraine. The third option is to simply keep whatever territory they have in the eastern Ukraine with them and to simply say that Ukraine cannot have them and that it is Russia's. The fourth option, of course, is to continue their incursions to invade the Donbass region and forcefully and to establish a military guarded border between the Donbass and Crimea and the rest of Ukraine. Now, I hope that that is not the option they choose and that they choose to follow the Minsk protocol and that they seek a United Nations referendum in the Donbass so that the people are free to express their will. And I hope that if that happens, Ukraine and Russia would respect the will of the people there. But that is not an option being discussed right now. That's just my own idea. So, most likely, what's going to happen is that Russia is going to continue putting pressure on Ukraine, and NATO will keep putting pressure on Russia. Ukraine is going to keep asking for more weapons from NATO to keep Russia on edge. And yeah, but I don't think a war is going to break out, at least not in the near future. Maybe next year, but not in the next few months. So yeah, that's what I did this month. The videos I made. I hope you enjoyed the videos I made this month and all the content. And I hope you come back for December, where I will discuss more such topics. And also, I'll be making a year end review about all the news that was covered by me in this year, in the last week of December. So stay tuned for that. If you want to watch any other video in this playlist, click here. If you want to watch uh, if you want to watch the previous video, click here. Thank you for watching. Vande Mataram.